It is June the 11th. We are into June. June is Pride Month, and we're going to find out more now about a UK-wide network of inclusive Christian communities. They have a very strong base in Colchester. It's called the Open Table Network Community. And to tell us more are leaders Joe Nice and Kyle Davison. Good morning to both of you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on BBC Essex this morning. If I can start with you, Joe, just explain to us what Open Table Network actually is.
Yes, good morning. Thanks for having us. So Open Table Network, it was born out of a need that people in the LGBT plus community were feeling to find their place to worship, where maybe sometimes they'd felt like they weren't included, or they'd been hurt by maybe some of the policies in churches. And it was born from that, and it's just expanded massively.
And it's been going for a number of years now, Kyle. Just explain to us exactly what happens in Open Table Network, because as Joe said, it was born out of a desire to make people feel included. So how does the network operate?
Okay, so for us at Colchester, we start with about half an hour where we can actually just sit together. We have tea, coffee, cake, and just actually feel included, feel like we're one, and literally it's just it's an amazing feeling that actually you can go somewhere and be yourself and be included.
And how often does the group in Colchester meet, Kyle?
So we meet the second Sunday of each month at the moment, but we're hoping to increase that.
And Joe, how did you come to get involved in Open Table?
Yeah, this is a story. So the Living in Love and Faith process started in the church, which is trying to decide if the church can marry people of the same sex and allow them to become ordained. And I became very hurt. I've been a member of the Church of England for a few years at that point, and I became very hurt when I really realised what was going on. I think I'd turned a blind eye to it before as a gay person myself. So I was very angry and needing a way to kind of channel my anger and do something good for our community. So my vicar put me in touch with the University of Essex chaplain, Sarah Neal, and we began talking about doing something that was inclusive. Sarah had some experience with Open Table, so we got in touch with them and finally began our own community in Colchester last October.
What was it that made you so angry, Joe? Because you mentioned there it was the living in love and faith process that made you think, made you start to debate with yourself what your faith brought to you and what it didn't give to you. What in particular was it that made you feel so determined to change?
At the time, I think I hadn't realised how much it actually excluded some people like me. Until there was one of the videos on the Living in Love and Faith course showed a lady who was a lay minister and wanting to become ordained, but she couldn't because she was married to a woman. And something hit me with that, and I was very upset. And so much so that I've recently tried to enter the process towards ordination training, but have been told that I am not allowed to because I'm getting married to my partner in September. So I'm very in this experience myself, and I just want to be able to help create a space for other people who feel similar to me.
Kyle, if I can ask you the same question, why did you get involved in Open Table? What was it that made you feel you needed something more other than what you were getting from your faith community?
So I have changed churches a number of times over the years, and most of the time it has been because the LGBT community isn't, is accepted as we hoped it would be. So luckily I had a friend who found an advert for Open Table, and it literally luckily for me, it's literally a 5-minute walk from where I live. So I went to check it out at the carol service in December, and was welcomed with open arms, and I feel like I'm finally home, which was actually a perfect song that you just played before this talk.
Oh yes, Michael Bublé, yes.
Yeah.
What was it about the network that gave you that sense of belonging?
They just want you to be yourself, 100% yourself, and give you a safe space to be able to worship God. And that is exactly what I've been praying for years.
And Joe, if I can ask you, what do you think that churches can do to bring Open Table into the wider church community? Because as both you and Kyle have said, you found somewhere where you feel at home, but to a certain extent, it's still separate from other churches, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. I think, a lot of churches are realising where they're at and trying to become more inclusive, but I think it's very easy for churches to fall into the trap of, well, of course we're inclusive, we'll have anybody, but if you don't make people aware of that, then how are they going to know? I mean, I remember I've been a Christian for about 6 years now, and I remember first looking for a church for myself and trying to see, if they were inclusive of LGBT people. And it's terrifying, actually, for some people to just walk in the door not knowing what the people inside are going to be feeling at all. And I think it's just very important that everybody embraces everybody and shows God's love for them, regardless of who they may be.
Kyle, do you sometimes think that the problem with churches expressing inclusivity comes not from the people that are part of the church, but from the church leadership itself?
That's a very tough question. Only because, I think it's not necessarily the church leadership. I think it's the education they've got and what they've been brought up with. So they don't necessarily know how to be more inclusive or to be more open, that they are following their church's traditional ways. Does that make sense?
And what does inclusivity mean for you? Because as you said, you've been part of Open Table now for a number of months, found them at Christmas. What does inclusivity look like if people are sort of listening and thinking, well, do you know what? I thought my church, my faith group was inclusive, but tell me what inclusivity looks like.
For me, it's literally being accepted completely for who you are, no matter whether, your sexuality, your gender, your race, your disability. And actually, if you look around your church, you can see whether they include people or not. Whether that's by the physical layout, or whether people actually take the time to talk to you and want to get to know you for you. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And Joe, if I can ask you, what do you think needs to change for people to feel included?
That is a big question. Yes. I think a lot of it is just the welcome that people get in church. I think we've got to make time as churches to talk to people, to talk to new people, and to just, to make anybody's differences irrelevant. And to do things like Open Table or join Inclusive Church, the charity that a lot of churches are a member of, and as is my church. Things like that to make themselves really visible as allies is massive.
So how do people get involved with Open Table if they want to find out more, if they want to come along?
So we are on the Open Table Network website. A list of all the communities are in there. 34 communities now, but the local one to here is Colchester. We have got social media sites, so Open Table Colchester on Facebook and Instagram, and Open Table Colch, because I ran out of characters, on Twitter.